Making It Personal with Bishop William Johnson on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Welcome to Making It Personal with Bishop Johnson. I'm Kelly Messer-Collins with the Diocese of Des Moines. On today's show, we're talking about Lyceum, a school for community life, which has been revived in Des Moines. We'll be visiting with Nathan Beacom, a young Catholic adult responsible for launching the revival of Lyceum, which fosters community and conversations. But before we get to today's interview, let's find out what's on the Bishop's mind.
It's going to be really illuminating for me to learn about this. So,
right.
But, in the meantime, here we are already moving through the month of April. We've been praying in a special way with our Holy Father's intention for healthcare workers, conscious of the many ways in which they, not only with the pandemic, but other ways, their vocation and the challenge they have to bring the healing Jesus, the risen Lord, brings to people. He continues to show, but the wonder and miraculous works yield now to the works that he stirs faith in our minds and hearts. So we're grateful for that. Lovely opportunity to be in the various parishes in a celebratory way with confirmation, St. John Norwalk, Assumption Granger, and tonight at St. Pius X in Urbandale. Last night, we gave fair shrift to the students at University of Iowa at the Newman Center. I was at Iowa State last month, and more familiar home territory for me. But friendly greeting there as well with those folks. I'm not going to get to participate in the Drake Relays or witness. That's one on my list here. Now, third time back in third year, and still haven't taken part of the Drake Relays. So that it's going to be something I look forward to. Are you a Relays fan?
I've done the road race before, but I haven't seen any. Actually, this is crazy, but they had pole vaulting at Jordan Creek Mall at one point, which sounds really weird. But then they also had a high jump at one of the grocery stores in town. So I've seen those. Yes.
Various venues.
Yes.
To get out and about. Yeah. So, but things happening here, and we think about the appearances of Jesus, but other strange phenomena happening here that those who represent the church in other ways are getting involved with. Kelly, what do you have for us?
Yes. So down under Australia, this Father Liam Ryan has just received the impressive Australian Bravery Award for paddling out to sea and rescuing a surfer who's trying to fend off a great white shark, a 5-meter great white shark. It actually happened 2 years ago, but I'm sure the pandemic slowed this award down.
The news from Australia doesn't always get here as quickly.
Well, pandemic.
It was in the bottle. I had to wash up on shore.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, people here in Iowa say, the media, the mainstream media.
Yeah, they paddled out there. He was with a friend. It was very providential timing. He saw the shark lunge at the surfer. Caught his board and then part of his leg, narrowly missing an artery. We've talked about that in my classes too. One of the classics.
So it wasn't Sharknado or anything?
It wasn't no tornado.
It's Shark Week or no? Okay.
But just as memorable and exciting. Yes.
So is father himself a surfer?
They were out paddling.
He kind of has that look.
I don't know if it was a paddle board or a surfboard, but I think maybe it was a paddle board. But they helped him in a very timely manner, so they saved the guy's life.
Okay. Wow. So,
well, never know.
I don't know that that's
calling.
in our faculties for the Diocese of Des Moines priests or not, but preventing shark attacks, but things that people get involved in. So, grateful for the support at the Blessman Gala this week. Blessman Ministries, obviously, in South Africa, and a great sponsor of Iowa Catholic Radio, as well as the Sarans too. We had the Bishop's Burst dinner a few weeks ago, and again the promotion of vocations. We had the appearance by Susie Flood and John Schlottman, but we're grateful for the ways in which they're continuing to serve and stir people along. So getting into the season of love, weddings again, and people, I think, allowing that to have their weddings in churches and the venues that are part of that. And so here we are on the cusp of May Day also. So the many blessings and the appearances of the Easter season, that people would celebrate the whole 50 days leading up to Pentecost. And so continuing to ask people to pray for our visioning process, praying for vocations to religious life and priesthood, as we are seeing the fruit that's born. Father Ross Parker tells me we've got 4 men who've applied to go to seminary this fall. Let's go for 6. Let's go for 8. Yeah, why not more? So, all right.
We're going to take a quick break and return. We'll visit with Nathan Beacom and talk about Lyceum. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Johnson on Iowa Catholic Radio and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network. Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop Johnson. On today's show, we're talking about Lyceum, a school for community life, which has a long history and has been recently revived in Des Moines. Our guest today is Nathan Beacom of St. Ambrose Cathedral, a young Catholic adult responsible for launching the revival of Lyceum.
So good morning, Mr. Beacom, Nathan, if I can call you that, please.
Sure.
Yeah, it's great to have you and live with us here in the studio, or with us in the studio. So,
thanks for having me.
People are going to think that, you have to be a card-carrying philosopher to get access on this show. That's not the case. Kelly has arranged for our recent guests. But you have a little bit of that pedigree as you went to the University of St. Thomas. But you're a native of Central Iowa. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep, that's right. I was born in Sioux City, grew up mostly here in the Des Moines area, though. And I went to the University of St. Thomas, where I studied philosophy with the intention of being a philosopher until...
just had no seminary overtones.
No seminary overtones.
Truth for its own sake. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I just was thirsty for wisdom. But I did want to be a philosophy professor, and it wasn't until the end of my undergrad that some of my teachers and mentors said, maybe that's not a great idea. There aren't, it's not a great market for philosophers these days. So,
in justice, they had to tell you that.
Yes, they did. And they said, unless this is the only thing you could ever see yourself doing, probably do something else.
Yeah,
just
how deep is the love affair here?
Yeah, you can always read philosophy, in the evenings. So,
yeah, but to make a meal of it. So what did unfold from there then? Once you got that wise counsel?
Yeah. So after that, I kind of had to look for what's next, and I was led into the world of public policy. And I worked in Washington for a couple of years at a think tank, and then in rural Nebraska at a different think tank.
Not the first place that springs to mind when we think about think tanks.
Exactly. And that was part of the reason I wanted to go there, because I thought it was a good thing that it was outside of that D.C. bubble where all that stuff goes on, that there was something in, Burke County, Nebraska, trying to put forth policy ideas too. And that plays into kind of the genesis of the Lyceum. So
just to pause, though, with Washington, D.C., I mean, can one keep one's soul in Washington, D.C. or not? Now, having lived there for a little bit, but not in that high-octane realm of ideas and the public policy. So, I mean, because so many young people are involved in that scene, right?
Definitely. There's constantly a stream of young people coming in, either idealistic or ambitious or some combination of the two. And whether you can keep your soul, I think it's possible, but tricky. There are a lot of temptations in politics, and temptations to power or wealth or influence or acclaim, just like you'd imagine. So there are people I know, there are sincere people in many different points of view there who are trying to do good things, but it's not the easiest place to keep your intentions pure.
So with Nebraska, did this fit with the particular focus you had in public policy? So I've always been interested in rural policy, even when I was in D.C., and farm policy and small towns and small businesses. And I worked on a little bit of that in D.C., but wanted to focus more and wanted to be back just in the Midwest. So that was what I did in Nebraska at the Center for Rural Affairs, is kind of advocate on rural issues. Specifically with agriculture or economic, or, we think about the declining populations, the demographics are not always good, if there's not some connection with an urban area,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, in rural areas, it's so many of the issues are intertwined, the economic and agricultural issues, and why people are leaving once they get out of high school or at whatever time. And so for me, it had to do with some of the dynamics of agricultural markets, but everything else as far as education and hospitals and food, because as those resources and population leave rural areas, they also begin to miss out on all the other kinds of resources. It's sort of a domino effect.
I mean, we think, it seems to me the springing up of satellite clinics, is a phenomenon that at least gives some access to healthcare and telemedicine and things like that. But no doubt it stretches rural folks, in this way, they want to provide and raise families in that way too.
Right.
So was it the World Food Prize or something else that led you to Des Moines then to cross the Missouri River here? And conscious of our friends in the Spirit Catholic Radio Network in Nebraska and beyond.
Sure. Well, I did gain a lot of affection for Nebraska in my time there. But coming back to Des Moines, it's just Des Moines is home, and I had this idea for quite some time to start the Lyceum movement, and last year I received a small challenge grant from a nonprofit called Lead for America to kind of give it a try. And so I always wanted to start it in Des Moines. I thought Des Moines was the perfect place to do it for a number of reasons. It's not too big, not too small, and so that's why I headed back.
So it was very intentional then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So you're really going to school me here. I mean, Lyceum, I have a whiff of Puritan, 19th century, some of the Enlightenment, Transcendentalists and things like that. Is this connected in any way? And then, floating around in my weird head is, Chautauqua movement and things like that, where people, it's kind of public moments to engage ideas.
Yeah, that's all exactly right. Those concepts all kind of orbit around the origin of the Lyceum. It started in 1826 in Connecticut. There was a farmer named Josiah Holbrook who had this idea that education and deep thinking and big ideas should be available outside of, at that time, you had this handful of universities that were kind of for a small set of wealthy people. And so he started...
Which at that time were religiously affiliated.
Yes.
Most have jettisoned that relationship.
Right. They functioned, I think, largely as seminaries at that time. But he wanted to just provide a place where farmers and mechanics and working people could also continue their learning and their formation. And he said the purpose of it was for the diffusion of knowledge, the elevation of tastes, and the forming of good citizens. And that remains kind of a good definition, although in an older kind of English, of what we're hoping to do today. And so after he started it, it took off and became a phenomenon. There were more than 3,000 lyceums across the country by mid-century. Abraham Lincoln gave his first public speech at a lyceum. Frederick Douglass would tour through. He came through lyceums here in Iowa and made his case against slavery. And it functioned as kind of the place for Americans to engage with ideas together with their neighbors. And so, and it existed in Iowa almost from the beginning of Des Moines in 1851. So one of the first things they thought to do here was to build a lyceum, a place where you could get together and think with your community. And that's the kind of thing that in the intervening years, I think a lot of our communities have lost.
Well, we lament the lack of civil dialogue in our country and how radically polarized we can become and adversarial in all of this, and
right.
and reducing people and their arguments, whether we use the word cancel or not. But so the Lyceum is both a place, there's a locus for it, but it's more a kind of moral and spiritual society, or am I on track here, Nathan?
Yeah.
Help me out.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's locally focused, but it's kind of a broader community between these locations. So we have locations right now in Des Moines, in Kansas, and in Minnesota. And what it is a place for people to kind of form relationships around searching after knowledge and wisdom together. So I think that's a good way of describing it. And it presents an alternative, as the Lyceum faded away, mass media was growing, and that became the new way for people to engage with ideas. And that went from radio to papers to 24-hour news to social media. And I think with each of those steps, we lost more and more about how to engage charitably and thoughtfully with ideas. And so where we are today, I think people are hungry for something that's less toxic than the way of engaging online. And our hope is that by getting people face to face, we can find better ways of engaging with each other.
Now, I mean, I myself could be intimidated that if I have to come to this, I have to sound halfway smart. I mean, is that something that, you're looking for certain credentials or just a passionate interest, or, can one come and maybe just kind of feel it out and listen more than, being an active voice in the conversation?
Sure. Yeah, not at all. It's like I mentioned, we have them in Des Moines. We also have them in some smaller communities, and we have everybody from farmers to construction workers to college students to retirees to professionals, whatever. It's pretty broad based, and it's also very casual. So it doesn't feel like an academic setting or school setting. We have beer and wine, and it's a chance to kind of hear from these interesting people in our community who you might not ordinarily get the chance to hear from. So last week we had the director of the State Historical Museum and Dave Price, who's been a longtime political reporter at Channel 13. and we just had an informal conversation, got to hear a lot of the really fascinating stories, and then people can kind of get into it together after we hear from the speakers and kind of engage those same themes.
So it's not like a TED Talk or something, where they give a 20-minute plus or minus, and then, that's
right.
it.
It's more like a conversation, yeah.
Okay. So you are intentional in choosing and inviting people to come and kind of get the conversation going.
Yep. So we'll have our first portion usually have some person who has some kind of special expertise or story to tell, and or a set of people who have different perspectives, and so in that event, the question was, why does it matter? Should it matter to know the history of this place, specifically Des Moines, or of our state? So we heard those two perspectives from two very knowledgeable people, and then there's the opportunity to kind of share your own thing and talk amongst yourselves.
Okay. All right. Are you the major domo choosing the topics, or you're obviously the catalyst here? But
yeah, in general, the topics are a combination of seeking out, what kind of stories and expertise are available, and also kind of crowdsourcing just from people I talk to about what would be interesting.
Mm-hmm. So the longer you're here, the more networking you do, and then people kind of, hey, Nathan, have you thought about this?
Yeah, exactly. And there are just so many fascinating stories in our area. And my dad worked with a gentleman who is a refugee from Laos, and he's not a public speaker or anything, but he has a fascinating story and a lot of interesting insights from his particular background. And Des Moines is just full of fascinating people with interesting things to say, and maybe not always a place to connect with people who want to talk about those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, you yourself are a man of faith. You're a Catholic. You kind of, discerning whether St. Peter's or St. Ambrose Cathedral, and Kelly, and we'd be happy to get you envelopes,
sure,
or electronic fund, but no. So, St. Augustine's has also been a place that you felt comfortable with. There really is a young adult professional community at St. Augustine's, isn't there?
Yeah, I think you get some people from Drake and DMU, and so there's some younger folks there for sure. And I started going there, my family started going there in grade school, so a lot of old friends come from there for me.
Okay, yeah, so it's home in lots of ways.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so your fiance did not necessarily choose the Feast of St. Augustine, August 28th, for that reason, but that's a happy coincidence.
Right, he's popping up again.
And what's her name? What you want to give her a shout?
Yeah, Benya Krause.
Okay,
yes.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, you didn't meet at University of St. Thomas then?
No. We met in a very kind of roundabout way. If I can just go off topic for a second.
It's making it personal,
since
man.
It's making
Go
it
for
personal. It's just kind of a fun story, and it's radio related because I've written for a magazine called Comment, which is not denominational, but it's magazine. It's a tagline is public theology for the common good. And I heard this gal on this podcast that they put out talking about a lot of these themes about dedication to community and to place and to your neighbors and things like that. And I thought that was really interesting. So I shot her an email and I said, hey, if I could help connect your work to Nebraska through the nonprofit she works with, let me know. And I happened to be driving through Minnesota the next weekend. And so we got lunch instead of Zoomed, and the rest is history.
Ooh, yeah, that is intriguing. So common passions, really.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, many blessings on your preparation.
Thank you.
The actual marriage itself. So marvelous to have that. Theology can be a match on the gasoline can. So is that something you try to skirt, or is this fair grounds for people to bring into the conversation?
Yeah, well, I think there was something positive about the old Lyceums and Chautauquas, which was that they weren't afraid to talk about theology or about God in a public setting. And I think we have a fear today that to do that is to be proselytizing or to be evangelizing. Mm-hmm. And so people's walls come up. But I think it's good to kind of model a different way of engaging. You can have a non-threatening and kind of honest conversation because God and religion are topics that have affected all of human culture since as far as we know, and today affect human culture in deep ways. And so in that sense, it's kind of, I think, probably impossible to talk meaningfully and just ignore it. So in that sense, it's not a focus necessarily of the Lyceum, but also not something that we would just kind of try to ignore. It's part of what the great human conversation has always been about, and so it's part of our conversation
asking
as well.
The ultimate questions,
right?
Our existence, where this is going, what's good for us to do together.
Yeah, exactly.
And personal rights and all those things that might be there. Have you ever had to kind of step in and moderate things a little bit, or dial down the intensity?
Sure.
Tell you what, I have this tendency once in a while to ask a question right as we're going into break,
Okay.
and I did it again, Nathan. So.
We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Johnson on Iowa Catholic Radio and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network. Welcome back. We are back with Nathan Beacom speaking about Lyceum.
So I was trying to provoke you before the break. There have been times where people get a little intense because the passion and ideas matter. Mm-hmm. It's something that you don't have to have moderators or security guards present.
Yeah, no security
no
guards
tasers
at
or
this
anything
point.
like that.
No tasers. So part of what we do is also we're trying to get people together face to face, and also trying to model fruitful ways of talking. And so to that end, I think our speakers that we invite, they understand what the ethos of it is, and they model good conversation. And also we have a set of habits that are kind of posted or that are shared. And these 6 habits of conversation, which are things like trying to read your neighbor's words in the most generous light, thinking of ourselves as ultimately somehow on the same team, even when we disagree.
The human team.
The human team, exactly. and we want what's best for our town and for our state and that kind of thing. Those kind of things then I think tend to create an atmosphere where people do engage a bit more generously. And we also aren't really about necessarily the hot topics. We're about trying to go kind of deeper and learn about history and stories and philosophy and ethical ideas, and go on that level where we can engage apart from kind of the anger that exists in our political conversations.
So this isn't a debate forum in any way?
No, it's much more
Nor simply
mutual.
like the storytellers forum. I mean, it seems its own unique thing.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Well, what's this like trying to get face-to-face conversation going? That was a Freudian slip. During the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, did you worry you're going to have to give your grant money back, or?
Well, there's always uncertainty. With the Omicron spike in January, that was a situation where we have to assess, do we have it this month or not? But we really got started last fall, and that's when broadly, aside from January, things started to kind of taper down, and people are really hungry to be in person, actually. And once they're there, I think they realize how much they've missed it, even not just from the pandemic, but more broadly in our times, the opportunity to talk to new people and get to know your neighbors. People just come out usually like very smiley and with this great energy, because we have a thing where this is like a sociologically documented thing where we are afraid to talk to strangers. People always rate themselves as afraid to talk to strangers, but then report that they're happy that they did. They come out of the interactions typically feeling very positive, and that's been our experience as well.
Coming out as joyful and as true neighbors, what a marvelous outcome. Yeah. And, this does touch on a kind of an existential fact, is that, this, I think, kind of endemic loneliness that people experience, young people and others. I think I saw a survey recently where young mothers are some of the loneliest category in our society. Is this intentional, or is that just a kind of happy byproduct that maybe you're addressing that? Yeah,
that's definitely part of our consideration. It's across all kinds of measures that loneliness is increasing in our society today, and people don't know or trust their neighbors, don't have as many friends as they used to. And history has lessons for this, because this is not the first time that this kind of thing has happened. The Industrial Revolution saw some similar factors, and it took intentional grassroots effort for people to get together and not be isolated for us to come out of that. And that was in the form of things like the Rotary Club and religious organizations and Boy Scouts and things like that. And so the Lyceum is an intentional grassroots effort to get people back in a room together and precisely to have a chance to make new friends and build new relationships.
Wow, we've whetted my appetite. Can a guy as old as me come? And 60 something?
Any age is welcome.
Yeah, and it's Lyceum, Lyceum. Is there a website for this? Or?
Yep, Lyceum, spelled like that, movement.org is our website.
Movement.org, good. All right. Well, thank you, Nathan Beacom, for being with us today.
Right. Thanks very much for having me.
This has been another edition of Making It Personal with Bishop Johnson. Thank you to our guests and all of our listeners in Iowa, Nebraska, and Wisconsin, wherever you may be listening to Iowa Catholic Radio and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network.
You can hear Making It Personal with Bishop William Johnson every week on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.